The last couple of songs on part one have a lot of flame. They have like kind of fire imagery, and it's about the world being kind of scorched in a way. And then part two, the songs take place in the wreckage afterwards, and it's about trying to find a sense of perseverance and motivation.
I've heard you say before that you feel like the band reached their creative, peak.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of sad.
Oh, but doesn't mean that there aren't other peaks ahead in the future.
Because that's how I interpret it.
No. I just kind of meant that. I think it surprised us how creative we were in the time of writing these records, because we're releasing two.
Yeah.
And we didn't intend to, in a way. So I think it was, I guess I was just referring to the fact that it felt like a very fertile time for the band. Mm-hmm. And in a way that I think, sometimes entropy can kind of set in, where once you've made 4 or 5 albums, it can become more difficult, or you kind of expend your creative energy. But I think that the opposite is true for us at the moment. So that's all I kind of meant. I more meant just... that we felt creatively potent at that time.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like you're afraid of not being creative anymore every once in a while, because I remember you saying that you were afraid that you guys wouldn't survive the hype that was created around you guys in the first year of the band.
Yeah, I think there's two things, I guess. Back then in 2008, there was a lot of hype around us and just quite a few of our peers at the same time. Mm-hmm. And not that it would conflict with the creativity, but more that the kind of, there can be backlash to hype. And my fear was that our music would be overwhelmed by the hype and by the press, rather than the music getting to speak for itself. But luckily we kind of rode it out. I think the other thing is just, I wonder whether creativity is a kind of finite, whether you have a finite amount of good work in you, or whether you can infinitely make creative work. I wonder whether it's a kind of resource that once you mine it, you can empty yourself. And I hope that that's not the case. I'd like to think that we'll be making music for a long time, and that I won't ever stop being creative. But it's obviously the fear of being a creative person that you won't be at some point in the future. So that's kind of, that's one of the anxieties, I guess.
Yeah. But it's kind of impressive, because from you guys' generation, I mean, we're 10 years further now. How do you think you guys survived and other bands didn't?
I think that, I don't know, there's lots of different reasons why a lot of our peers either broke up or stopped making music. So I think from our perspective, we find it fulfilling. We find it meaningful. It's a meaningful way to spend a life. Mm-hmm. We're all friends, we get on, so socially it feels good. We don't we haven't fallen out with each other, and so there's friendship, there's fulfillment, there's a sense of purpose to it, and I think that it keeps it feeling valuable. And I think that we also believe that there are still great songs that we will write in the future, so you're chasing it, it's it's kind of addictive in a way.
Yeah, but speaking of breaking up, one of the band members left, unfortunately, and I've heard that he was the calm person of the group who kept everybody together.
Yeah.
Who has that role now?
I don't know if we found the replacement in that way. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure.
You're not sure. There still has to be a chosen one.
Yeah. We still yet to decide how. The chemistry definitely has changed in certain ways, as you would expect. But it's not necessarily. I mean, we obviously miss Walter, but of
course.
It's not necessarily for the worse in some ways. I think it might have also helped us to write this amount of music, that it changed. It shook the bottle up, a bit.
I was about to ask, do you think you've reached that creative peak because of a Walter that left?
Partly, I think the one big effect of it was that we couldn't. We had a kind of. We had a pattern of how to make music, so we would spend time in a rehearsal room in Oxford, there was a dynamic that we had, and it was quite well trodden.
Yep.
And I think by him leaving, it meant that we had to adapt. We had to approach it in a different way. So that in that sense, it was kind of good that his departure.
And one of those ways is that you guys produced this whole album.
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, I can imagine that putting a lot of pressure on the band.
Yeah, it was. There was definitely quite a lot of sleepless nights. I stopped sleeping well for quite a few months. I think that it was good to do though, because we'd wondered for a long time what it would be like to work without outside influence, and I think that it means that the end product is a more kind of concentrated version of us as a creative group without anyone else's influence. So it was good in that way, but it was stressful. You know, it was a lot of work.
Is that an approach that you're going to do with the future albums?
I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll see how robust we're feeling later on.
Yeah. So it's clear that you guys created a new approach to the process of the album.
Yeah.
Does that also influence the way the live performances look and feel?
So I think that, you know, fundamentally we still like play the same as we kind of always have done, which is basically to try and make the shows as intense and powerful as possible. And you know, the one thing that I guess has changed is like we put a lot more intention into the stage setup, and we started using a lot more live visuals. Unfortunately, we don't have them today at Down in the Rabbit Hole. We couldn't bring our screens today.
Yeah.
But I think that's been fun to try and like think about how you visually represent songs with video content on stage, and I think it makes the show more immersive.
And especially with this new album that's a lot about the state of the world, it can give it an extra layer. I feel like
you can put the exclamation point on the message of the song. Definitely.
And that's also something that I'm wondering about, like, how do you stay sane? Because I know you have a hard time dealing sometimes with like reading the newspapers and opening all the news apps and reading about all the problems and the worries in the world. How do you cope with those things?
I think, you know, I think it's kind of difficult to remain optimistic, but I think that you have to, because otherwise you're facing defeat, you know. And I think it's quite easy to get swallowed up with depressive thoughts, because we are kind of living in it is a depressing time at the moment to think about the extinction of species and the political chaos and the fact that things don't seem to make sense. You just have to keep going, though. I think that's like, I don't know, because if you don't keep going, then you know, then the game's up, really. Yeah. So,
is this also the same theme that's gonna incorporate in part 2 of the album?
Yeah, the part 2 kind of carries off. So, you know, the last couple of songs on part 1 have a lot of flame. They have like kind of fire imagery, and it's about the world being kind of scorched in a way. And then part 2, the songs take place in the wreckage afterwards, and it's about trying to find a sense of perseverance and motivation. So it continues the story, and then at the end of part 2, the last song is like a 10-minute epic, and it's kind of about, it's called Neptune, and it's essentially about wanting to leave the planet.
That's like the longest song you guys ever made.
Yeah, it's long, It's great. I think it's one of our favourite songs we've ever made. Probably.
That must be amazing to do live then.
Yeah, we haven't actually played it live yet, so but we're excited.
Yeah. Was there any fear that it was going to feel like an overkill?
That song?
No, like the two albums.
I think that it could have been, had we released them at the same time, like if we'd released a kind of classic double album, I think then I think that it would be too much. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to separate them, because then you have a sense of proportion, and you can live with album 1 and you can get to know it, and it's manageable. You know, it's 10 tracks and it's about 40 minutes, and that feels kind of right. And then 6 months later, or however long it will be, you get the next installment, and then you can live with it, and it can become your friend, rather than feeling like you're putting a Charles Dickens novel in front of somebody, and like it shouldn't feel like homework. So and
the last question, because we previously talked about the fear after the first year of the band that you weren't gonna get over the hype. Is there a fear that you have right now for the band?
I mean, it's always that, it's that stuff, I guess. I mean, not about the hype, but we definitely are slightly neurotic. You know, we worry about things, but in some ways that can be quite a good motivator. So at the moment, though, we feel pretty good. We're excited about part 2 coming out. I think trying to not touring we're touring a lot, and we're drinking a lot and stuff. So that sometimes I worry a little bit about the health side of stuff. But
I think that's a good thing to worry about.
yeah, because then maybe we'll start to be a bit healthier in the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.